Hi there, this is Dr. Cindy Schreiber, and we are working with day 17 here for your 30-day to sobriety solution. I am so proud of you. I know that this stuff works. I'm enjoying it, and I'm sure you will too. Now, this is powerful, the eternal optimist solution. Practicing positive expectations and optimism. Now, this is with Norman Vincent Peale, and my grandma used to say, think positive. She read his books, and it changed her life for sure. If you think in positive terms, you will not get negative results. If you think in negative terms, you will get negative results. Positive terms, you will achieve positive results. It's as simple as that by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. The quality of your thoughts determine your happiness, your feelings, and ultimately the actions you take and the results you experience. Today's focus is on how to harness the power of your thoughts to help you thrive in sobriety. We don't want you to just get by. When you think more positively and limit your negative self-talk, you greatly improve your ability to permanently stop or cut back on your drug and alcohol uses. Now, negativity explained. I would say that about 80 to 90% of most people's thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of its dysfunctional and often negative nature, much of it is also harmful. Observe your mind, and you will find this to be true. It causes serious leakage of vital information, and this is through by Eckhart Tolle. The opposite of optimism is pessimism or negativity. Negative thoughts such as complaining, blaming, worrying, and judging others results in feelings of anxiety, fear, anger, resentment, guilt, and shame. When you're caught up in negative thoughts, the negative feelings they create, you are not living in the present moment. Oh, wow. Let's say that again. When we or you are caught up in negative thoughts, and the negative feelings they create, you are not living in the present moment. You might be thinking, no, that isn't true. I get angry in the present when I'm stuck in traffic or when my boss gives me a project I hate. What is really bothering you in these examples? Have you ever been in bad traffic or given projects you didn't like, yet you were still in a good mood? The difference was your interpretation of the situation. In particular, your interpretation of what's going on is what's going to happen in the future because of this. If you're listening to a great song in the car and have nowhere you need to be, the traffic doesn't bother you as much. In fact, you might even enjoy the time alone. But if the traffic is going to make you late, you might get angry or frustrated because you assume that being late is going to cause you future pain. The same goes for the project you hate. You make assumptions about the pain you're going to experience in the future when you work on that project. Here's a story of 3 people that illustrates this. One person agreed to go outside with a coworker for a smoke break first thing in the morning, something she had never done before noon. Another overslept after staying up late watching football the night before. The third person was about to transfer from a local subway station to an express as he did every morning, but he noticed how crowded it was and decided to stay on the less crowded local train and just be a little late for work. Each of these people worked at the World Trade Center because they were not in the towers on September 11th when the terrorists flew planes into the building. They all survived, while their workers who were in the building did not. We can't predict the future or change the past just because something might appear to be bad, like we're late, or good in the present moment. We really have no idea how to judge a single event without knowing the whole story, and we will never know the whole story. But you can learn to control your thoughts in the present moment because you really don't know what's going to happen in the future, and the past is over. You can choose to interpret everything that happens as a good thing and be optimistic about it. I'm late. Hey, maybe there was going to be a car crash up there. How much happier would you be if you didn't get caught up in the negativity surrounding the perceived uncontrollable and bad things that happen to you every day? Would you be likely to use less drugs? Negative thinking, drinking. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. This is by good old Helen Keller in 1880. She lived 1880 to 1968. Optimism is the faith that leads to achievement. Nothing can be done without hope and confidence. Today we're going to explore positive versus negative thoughts. Unfortunately, this topic is boring, hard to grasp, and most people don't find it useful. How does reading this make you feel? Probably not too excited to keep reading. And if the chapter contained the single most effective solution that would help you to achieve a huge breakthrough, you would probably miss it because your expectations are so negative. Your expectations change how you feel in the present moment, as well as how you will feel in the future. As you do the thing you have expectations about, whether it's reading this book, going for a job, attending a party, knowing that you won't be using. But many people have been conditioned to have negative expectations more often than positive. By the way, this topic is not really boring. Problem users often get caught up in what we call negative drinking thinking, or stinking thinking, or monkey mind thinking. They focus on the problems and the challenges of using, and not on the desire and the ability to thrive in sobriety. With negative thinking, drinking, your thoughts can often come back to complaining, blaming, and resenting, instead of being grateful for all the good things in your life. Mark Twain, the celebrated American author, captured this concept when he said, "I am an old man and have known a great many troubles, but most of them never ever happened." What about you? When this insight became really clear to Dave, he was newly sober and decided to coach his daughter's first grade basketball team. 5 weeks after practices began, the league let a new girl who had never played basketball before join the team. And when the girl's mother informed Dave that her daughters would be able to make one of the 2 basketball practices before the first game, Dave decided to bench her for the first game because he didn't feel she would be prepared only after 1 practice, and because he thought it wasn't fair to the rest of the players. The girl's parents objected to this decision and contacted the league to complain. It was the holiday and there were delays in the league responding, which led to a lot of time for Dave to speculate on the eventual outcome. Fortunately, Dave had an insight during this time that dramatically changed his life. Dave realized that he was being judgmental and resentful of the parents, and was also complaining about the situation. He even thought about how nice it would be to fall off the wagon and go drinking with his friends and complain about it. He found himself playing out a variety of scenarios about what might happen, like how the league would respond or how the parents would respond. But he realized that all of these were negative. Not once did he think, the league will support my decision and the parents will be understanding. Dave had always thought of himself as a positive person, a true optimist, but he realized now that this was a common theme in his life. When there was a potential conflict, instead of having an attitude of positive expectation, he always focused on negative outcomes. This awareness was all Dave needed to change, and he found that once he had freed himself from this bad habit, it created a dramatic shift in the level of happiness he experienced. Can you relate to this? Do you spend your time thinking about negative outcomes or how things can go wrong before they ever happen? The more you do this, the more you will have the desire to drink and use. The more likely your negative outcomes you envision will happen. Because you see, here's the negative thinking trap, and this is by Courtney, who did the 30-day graduate from this program. The eternal optimist solution opened my eyes to the fact that I am in control of the amount of negativity I let into my life. As long as I keep letting those negative thinking traps lead me back to feelings of self-loathing and anxiety, and ultimately back to using, I will never be happy. By implementing the action steps in today's solution, I was finally able to recognize and change my inner voice to support my goals and dreams of living a clean, happy life. Now, most everyone has these negative self-talks, but to change it, you first need to identify what it sounds like to you. You may hear negative self-talk in internal dialogue in your own voice or the voice of someone from the past or present who has put you down. Note the tone of your voice in your negative self-talk. The tone is far more important than the actual words. When critical self-talk is in the negative voice of someone who criticizes you, the overall impact of the self-talk is much more negative and hurtful. It can reinforce false beliefs and trigger a desire to use. But you can change these negative messages. The process of identifying and changing these destructive thought patterns or negative thinking traps can lead you back to using. It is used in cognitive therapy, sometimes called talk therapy. This process has been successfully used to treat addiction. In many ways, the action steps for today are similar to the work a cognitive therapist would be doing with you. You're welcome. The action steps will help you see that your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, they're all connected. And they will help you to identify where your thinking is holding you back. And then help you shift your thinking. It's so easy. It's just shifting your thinking. So if you find today especially valuable, we have included some additional cognitive therapy resources on the companion website, which you may want to check out. Now, when you actively stop negative thoughts and substitute positive thoughts, you can also change negative, self-limiting beliefs and feelings that can trigger your low moods and anxiety, which can trigger a desire to use. Eventually, positive self-talk leads to more positive behaviors and experiences. The first step in this process is to review the following list of negative thinking traps for many problem users. Pay attention to the tone and the voice of the self-talk in order to identify which traps are familiar to you and hurt your chances for thriving in sobriety. Perfectionism. When you are a perfectionist, you constantly judge and critique yourself. Instead, you want to acknowledge that for most things, good enough is good enough. Nothing will ever be perfect, so you're setting yourself up for an invitation of failure. Negative labeling. When you define yourself or others with negative labels such as I'm a drunk or I'm a loser, it only strengthens your attachment to the label and makes it harder for you to change your behavior or perspective. Avoid labels. You're not a drunk, an addict. Drinking is something you do, not who you are. Addiction is something that happened, but that's not you. A failure is something you experience, but that's not who you are. It's all part of living. Generalizing. This is the all or nothing trap. It's easy to say, I always, or I never, or you don't always do anything. For example, you don't use dope when you're asleep. Instead, focus on specifics. For instance, exactly when and where do you feel uncomfortable, get anxious, and use. Then use the information to better understand how to shift the behavior. Do you always get high when you have a drink, or other times when you just have had one? Another form of generalizing is to use the words everything or nothing, as in nothing ever goes my way, or I've tried everything and nothing's worked. The truth is you haven't tried everything. If you did, you would be clean. Drinking is the only way I can cope with stress. Of course it's not the only way. You can cope by exercising, dancing, walking, meditating, massaging, breathing techniques, tapping, and many more ways to relax. Deletion. Deletion shows up when problem users as euphorial recall, which is a tendency to recall only the positive experiences of when you used and ignore the negative experiences and consequences. You delete all negative experiences so the idea of using becomes more enticing. When we're coaching someone, we generally ask this question. When you think of some past times you were using, what comes to mind first? The answer usually contains mostly positive, but when you ask clients specific questions to elicit their bad experiences and the negative consequences of their using, they realize that the euphoria recall plays a major role in this deletion trap. Euphoria recall also relates to why willpower alone doesn't work. The further away you are from the pain of using, the harder it is to abstain because you remember the good times and forget the bad times. This is why it's important to use your journal. It's a fantastic tool. You can go back and read what really happened, like the before you that you wrote on day 2. Jumping to conclusions. You jump to negative conclusions and assume things will turn out badly. Or you see something that starts out that way, other negative experiences or failures have started out, and you immediately play out the rest of it in your head. It's important to recognize that every event or situation is unique and different, and to stay open to what is happening in the moment. Exaggeration versus minimization. You exaggerate the importance of the bad things in your life. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. I'm ruined. And you minimize or fail to celebrate the significant good things. Flip this around. Exaggerate the positive and minimize the negative. Okay? Let's take a breath and catch up, everybody. You will get caught up in negative emotions and assume that they reflect the way you really are. Acknowledge it. The emotions are temporary and can be changed. Notice how you're feeling and ask yourself how you might have come to feel this way. What thoughts are you thinking right now? What pictures are you imagining? Once you recognize what makes you feel the way you do, it's much easier to identify and change the false logic that created the feelings. Should statements. When you say, I should stop drinking, part of you responds by resisting with a, I don't know what, I don't want to, and you can't make me kind of energy. Replace the word should with the word I want to stop using, or I want to be in control of my using. Drop the word should from your vocabulary. Nobody likes to be should on, including you. So be careful with your shoulds. I'm letting my cat in. Personalization. This is when you view yourself as the cause of events that you may have nothing to do with you. If you come home to find that your spouse or partner is upset, don't immediately assume it's about you. Ask likewise if he or she is getting ready to go out and say, well, I guess the reason you can't go to the party with me is because you're working on that important project for work. You could also end up personalizing the statement by saying, why are you always so critical of my work when I'm just trying to make a living and support the family? See the difference? It's all in how you word things. And then mind reading. You guess what someone else is feeling or thinking without asking. So just ask. You might be surprised at how wrong your assumptions are. Remember that when in doubt, check it out. All the negative thinking traps, which most problem users struggle with one time or another, contribute to your low self-esteem and feeling of overwhelm and disconnectedness and hopelessness and anxiety, all at which increase the likelihood that you will use to numb out these feelings. When you recognize, challenge, and replace your negative thinking with positive, you dramatically reduce your desire to use. So let's look at how you can break out of these repeating patterns of self-defeating thoughts. The power of awareness. It is our desire that you become one who is happy with that which you are and that which you have, while at the same time becoming eager for more. This is the optimal creative vantage point, to stand on the brink of what is coming and feeling eager and optimistic. These are the people that did the book, Esther and Jerry Hicks, Learning to Manifest Your Desires, and this is very powerful on the law of attraction. That's exactly what it is. This is the optimal creative vantage point, to stand on the brink of what is coming, feeling eager, optimistic, in anticipation, with no feelings of impatience, doubt, or unworthiness hindering the receiving of it. That is the science of deliberate creation at its best, okay? It all starts with awareness. You can't change what you aren't aware of. When you're not conscious of what you're doing, you just keep doing the same self-destructive habits. The best way to expand your awareness is by journaling every day. Write this stuff down. Or just speak to it in your notes in your phone. This is why we sound like a broken record about writing in your journal. It is a critical component of creating the personal awareness that will lead you to a breakthrough. Successful people are optimistic, even in the face of great challenges. They are almost always able to reframe a problem or a failure as an opportunity to learn and grow. Dr. Cindy has shared this with my boyfriend who had the stroke, my daughter who became a MAGA full-out 3-time Trump voter, my son who struggles with addiction. And how does Dr. Cindy make it every day? I am a person who is into the power of now, the power of manifesting my desires through the law of attraction. I'm a very optimistic person. Even in the face of great challenges, they are almost always able to reframe a problem or a failure as an opportunity to learn and grow. People who struggle usually get caught in negative thinking traps, unable to break the pattern once it begins. For example, have you ever temporarily cut back on using only to disappoint yourself and go back to your old patterns? When this happens, did you feel like a failure and revert to negative thinking traps, such as making generalizations? I'll never be able to stop drinking or using or jumping to conclusions and using emotional reasons. I'll never be able to deal with stress without using. These negative thinking traps will lead you back to using, so you want to recognize those thoughts don't work. They're just thoughts, people. This is a mind game. And then ask yourself what you need to do differently. For example, ask yourself, how did I handle stress in my life before I started using? What have I done to deal with stress when using wasn't an option, such as while at work? Most likely you will discover that one or several negative thinking traps led you back to using. Matt's story is the perfect example of how identifying the negative thinking traps in his life led to breakthroughs he needed to thrive in sobriety. Breaking through Matt's traps. I haven't gone back to drinking or using, and the thought of ever having another hangover gives me chills. I feel great, and I can't believe I wasted a lot of my life trying to avoid my life. He was a graduate of the program. In his early 50s, Matt had a successful career, a beautiful wife, and 2 smart, talented kids. He was a respected member of the community. Even though his career success had afforded him the freedom to never have to work another day in his life, he was terrified of not working. At the same time, no matter how successful he was at work, he never believed or felt he was good enough. So Matt used every night. He recalls how he felt toward the end of his drinking. I was anxious, depressed, and unhappy, and the alcohol helped me cope with my feelings until it didn't anymore. At that point, I felt desperation setting in. I remember asking myself, what now? I started going to AA, where I was told, just stop and things will get better, but it might take a long time. I remember how scared I was to hear this. It painted a gloomy picture of the future, with months or even years of continued anxiety and depression. I knew there had to be a better approach, and that's when I found the 30-day solution. We don't say just stop. We say cut back. And yes, you probably will stop, but most people just need to control it. Within days of starting the program, Matt's life changed for the better. He said, I would complete a solution every day and know that I was becoming a better person. Not just in relation to using, but in every area of my life. I started to get my self-confidence back, and more importantly, I started to see a happier, healthier future version of myself that I could become. See, there's so much psychology in this, people. It's like going to the therapist for free. You're welcome. During the 30-day sobriety solution, Matt recognized his negative thinking traps, including perfectionism, exaggeration, minimalization, jumping to conclusions, taking everything personal, and making should statements. Since Matt believed he had to be perfect enough, he was constantly driving himself to be more and do better. Since perfect is never possible, and because his fear of not being perfect enough was always eating at him, no matter how much he did and how much success it brought him, Matt always felt like I was never good enough. My self-esteem was dependent on getting praise from others, especially at work, since I had no self-esteem. No amount of praise was enough, and I lived my life in a fog that I lifted by using. Because Matt needed to appear perfect, dress perfect, act perfect, he exaggerated his accomplishments and minimalized his failures in hopes of getting more approval. But in his heart, he knew he wasn't being authentic and truthful, which only further increased his desire to use. Matt jumped to conclusion and personalized other people's actions. As a result, he was continually asking himself, what did they mean by that comment? Why didn't they give me the acknowledgement and recognition I deserved? Are they jealous? Are they trying to imply that I'm not good enough? Chip on his shoulder. Because he thought he was not good enough, he constantly felt that he had to be doing more. And his self-talk constantly streamed in the should statements. I should be able to make money. I should be able to be promoted. I should be the hero on the team rescuing my coworkers by taking on their responsibilities. When he did rescue coworkers and they didn't reciprocate, he ended up feeling angry and resentful. As Matt stayed in the program and changed his negative thinking traps, he dramatically curbed his desire to use. 3 years later, almost every aspect of Matt's life had markedly improved. He quit his old job and was inundated with more interesting opportunities. He changed his diet. He started exercising. He lost 53 pounds, which he has kept off. He also started spending more time with the wife and the kids, something he hadn't done in a long time. As a result of these positive changes, he decided his life was much better when he completely abstained from using, which was quickly validated after he briefly returned to drinking on 2 different occasions. Matt's 2 returns to drinking were short-lived, lasting only a day each time, and happened only at night. He said, "I knew I had a choice, but the few hours of semi-pleasure the drinking gave me was far outweighed by the self-contempt I felt afterward, and the knowledge that drinking came at the ultimate cost of sacrificing my real happiness." Matt hasn't used or drank any alcohol in over 2 years. He enjoys attending AA meetings and still revisits some of the 30-day solutions in the program when he feels that he's getting off track. How do you fix a dark house? We're coming up to the closing, people. What you focus on expands, and when you focus on the goodness of your life, you create more of it. Opportunities, relationships, even money flows my way when I learn to be grateful no matter what happened in my life. And this is Oprah Winfrey. In their program, 11 Forgotten Laws, Bob Proctor and Mary Morrissey ask, "What do you do when you walk into a dark house and you can't see?" The answer, of course, is simple. You turn on a light. You don't try to push away the darkness. You simply turn on a light, and then another and another. The solution is exactly the same for overcoming negativity. Instead of trying to push away your negative thoughts, you replace them by choosing to think something more positive. As you fill your mental house with the light of positive thoughts and expectations, there will be no room left for darkness of your negative thoughts. Similarly, instead of focusing on quitting using, focus on thriving as you're clean. Thriving in sobriety. Instead of focusing on resentment and anger toward people who have hurt you, focus on understanding and forgiving them. Instead of focusing on your mistakes and your failures, focus on your lessons and your successes. Instead of focusing on your limiting beliefs, focus on positive beliefs you have written to replace them. Instead of focusing on images of what you don't want, focus on images of what you do want. When you keep turning on the lights, the rest will take care of itself. Our clients tell us that when they finally get this and apply it regularly to their lives, they wonder how and why they ever got stuck in the mental trap of focusing on what they don't want. And this is Dr. Cindy's problem too. Because with all these people in my family that had dysfunctional problems, I kept focusing on them. Why can't they change? Why can't they be more supportive? And what I finally realized is I have to change. I have to go towards healing the world. My kids are grown now. Our clients tell us when they finally get this and apply it regularly in their lives, they wonder how and why they ever got stuck in the mental trap of focusing on what they don't want. In retrospect, the positive focus approach seems so obvious, yet their unexamined habitual thoughts and drinking kept them from ever being able to see things clearly. We're almost done, folks. I'm so proud of you. Listen to this, people. Negative traps in your life. A pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. This is so important. This is by Winston Churchill. So, in this book, The Power of Your Supermind, best-selling author Vernon Howard explains the importance of identifying negativity in your life. He writes, "Honest self-observation dissolves pains and pressures that formerly did their dreadful work in the darkness unawareness. See, whatever you bring to light from your subconscious mind heals." This is so important. I urge you to memorize and reflect upon the summary. Detection of inner negativity is not a negative act, but a courageously positive act that makes you a new person. Detection of inner negativity is not a negative act, where you see where you're negative. It's courageous. It's a positive act that makes you a new person. So the first action step for today is to write down each of the negative thinking traps above in your journal, and then write about how each one shows up in your life. Include specific examples and be sure to add as many details as you can, such as when, where, and especially with whom. As you write about each, see if you can discern whose voice is speaking. Are there should statements coming from your father or negative labeling from your mothers. These are all limiting beliefs that you have to cut the cords from your parents or your ex. Tone of voice, thoughts. These are all clues of where the thoughts are coming from. For example, we see many partners and spouses who try to read each other's minds. They try to discern how the other is feeling without asking. They also struggle with deletion, which is where you let one negative comment completely delete all the positive comments of the day. Remember, even though you're looking at the internal negative self-talk, negative comments can show up externally in conversations or an argument. For instance, you might use generalizations at times with your spouse or partner by internally getting annoyed with someone, he or she sad, and think to yourself, you always do this. Then you might eventually decide to say out loud, you always do this, instead of, it seems like at certain times you do this. The next step is to write down how you can change your negative thinking trap. That's right. It helps yourself and it helps everybody around you. If you catch yourself thinking, I can never stop using, that's a generalization, then write down what is really true. When do you struggle the most not to use? Weekends? Weekdays? When are you at a party? Or when are you home alone? Also, is it really true? Do you know you have to read about people like yourself who have quit drinking and are happy? Last, what are the tones and the voice of this generalization? Do you hear one of your parents' voices saying this in a condescending tone? Or an ex-mate or a former boss? Another example might be a night where you always drink, but for whatever reason you did not drink this time. What emotions did you experience? Did you feel frustrated, bored, sad because you weren't using? Did you feel those emotions were permanent, like an emotional reasoning trap? Or were you able to recognize they were just temporary feelings, temporary suffering, and that you had the power to change them? When you think about drinking, your past experiences of drinking, do you remember only how much fun you had? Or do you delete the times you felt lonely and sad and when you were using alone? Or the mean and hurtful things you said while drinking or using? Or how you felt the next morning? Does your drinking thinking recall only the happy moments and delete all the negative ones? This is a powerful process, people, because you will start to recognize specific triggers, patterns, and places where you get caught up in negative thinking, which can lead you back to using. So sometimes, boy, this is the longest chapter, but we're getting there. The awareness of these patterns in your life is all you need to make a lasting change, okay? Now here's the positive thinking trap. It's by Tony Robbins. You have to see things as they really are, not worse than they are. That view of life only gives you the excuse not to do something. So again, the positive thinking trap, you have to see things as they really are, but not worse than they are. That view of life only gives you the excuse to not do something. Not all positive thinking is the same. As great as positive thinking is, it is possible for it to hold you back by basically tricking you into a state of complacency. Gabrielle Oettingen, a professor of psychology at New York University, and her colleagues completed several studies of goal setting, and they discovered that by focusing only on the positive thoughts, participants tricked themselves into believing they had already succeeded, which resulted in them having less drive to do the actual work. They discovered the optimal approach is to practice a technique called mental contrasting, which includes positive thinking. First, spend several minutes thinking of your goal and imagining you're achieving the goal. Then think about the obstacles that you'll have to overcome and how to do this. This is similar to the strategy we recommended on day 3 in the pendulum solution, and the one that the hip and knee surgery patients used to recover almost twice as fast as others who didn't envision specific goals and recovery methods. Our message here is this: don't let simplistic or overly positive attitude blind you to the actual challenges you will face and the work you will have to do to accomplish this. Have a positive expectation that you will succeed and think about how you will handle these inevitable challenges. Cravings. It really is suffering. Uncomfortable feelings. That is suffering. Office parties you have to give up. Peer pressure. That is suffering. And there is some suffering involved, but it's very temporary. And of course, keep doing the action steps on the solution. Now, day 17 action steps. Okay, one of the most powerful takeaways from the 30-day sobriety outside of finally removing my desire to drink was all the notes I wrote in my journal throughout the program. Now when I start to feel my addiction kicking in, I just read my journal, and specifically some of my favorite entries, which almost immediately get me excited about the future and inspire me to take full action. Whether you call it positive self-talk, positive thinking, or simply optimism, the more you have in your life, the more you will thrive. Without a positive or optimistic outlook, the possibility of truly thriving is almost non-existent. In a bad mood, stop and analyze your thoughts. Ask yourself, what am I thinking about? What is my negative self-talk? Whose voice is this? What is the tone of the voice? Now, this is your homework, your action steps. Once you're aware of what is putting you in a bad mood, change your thoughts by using what you have learned today in past solutions. Write down your negative thinking traps. Okay. Everything else I have tried to stop drinking has failed, so the program is going to fail too. That's a negative thinking trap. For example, you may have started the solution with the jump to conclusions trap by saying or thinking, everything else I've ever tried has never worked. So you have to change all of these thoughts. Write down how to change each of your traps. For example, if one of your traps is jumping to conclusions, ask yourself, what is different about this attempt to quit from the other times I have tried? What is different about this program compared with the others I have tried? If one of the traps is making a should statement, ask yourself, what statements could I be using that would demonstrate my willing choice to participate instead of using guilt to motivate myself? In a positive tone, ask, what specifically is holding me back from what I want? And if you find yourself making should statements to others about what they ought to do, change this by first asking them whether or not they would like any advice from you. One of the companion websites, you will find a study that reveals 2 most destructive words you can ever use and the simple change you can make to eliminate them from your thinking and your speech. In addition, we explore a famous experiment with water that demonstrates how words and thoughts can actually create a physiological change in your body. Be sure to visit http://day17.solutions. And my people, we have done it. This is a very, very good, very deep, very intense session. It took a little bit longer, but this will pay off in your life with benefits of sobriety. For years to come, you will thrive in sobriety. I love you. I believe in you. I know you can do this, and I will see you in your dreams. Congratulations. You did it.